Now, I'm sitting in Tom Miller's seat, so that means, from what I understand, I'm required to make a movie allusion. So the movie I would call to your attention is Ghostbusters 1, okay? Forget 2 or 3, okay? But Ghostbusters 1, you remember there's the 4 Ghostbusters, they capture ghosts, they put them in a containment facility in the bottom of a former New York City firehouse. And the nemesis of the Ghostbusters is an attorney for the EPA named Walter Peck. And Walter, at one point, comes in to the firehouse and with utility workers from the city and the police, storms down to the basement where the container facility is and orders the utility workers, says, "Shut it off. Shut it off." And the Ghostbusters are saying, "You really don't want to do this. You don't know what's going to happen. Bad things are going to occur. Please, please don't do it." And Walter Peck says, "Shut it down. Shut it down." And they shut it down, and quite literally, all hell breaks loose. I offer that as a metaphor. Now, people on my side of the fence would welcome the opportunity, and welcome and thank you for having us at this table, welcome the opportunity to offer our insights and advice. And I do notice this past week that Donald Trump invited Zeke Emanuel to Trump Tower to talk about it, so let the healing begin. But let me focus just a few points. The central matter, I think, from our perspective, that stands in our way of feeling comfort with this process and where we're going. We've had heartening words and heartening promises from Donald Trump, from Paul Ryan, from Mitch McConnell, that no one is going to lose coverage, that it's going to be just as good, it's going to be better coverage, and it's going to cost less. And if that can happen, yippee, we're all for it. But the thing that stands in our way is the reality as we look at the plans that have been advanced by Donald Trump, by Paul Ryan, by Tom Price, by AEI. It doesn't come close to the levels of coverage and support that we have now. And we see in the reconciliation bill from a year ago and others, let's repeal those taxes so fewer dollars. When you move from an income-based subsidy system through the premium tax credits to a flat one, you're going to put it at a level where most of the people who get the subsidies today, it's not going to be nearly enough. And so we are looking at potentially, and we don't know, but this was the estimate not from Democratic think tanks, this was from CBO a year ago, scoring the reconciliation bill. 22 million people would lose coverage with the reconciliation bill that the president vetoed last December. So there's major issues in terms of it. And I guess, business people are in charge, and we're being asked, let's repeal the financing and trust us. What comes next is going to be much better. It's going to be good. What business man or woman would accept that kind of a deal? So that stands in the way. But that's not also. Another major concern, guaranteed issue. It is heartening that the president and the speaker and other folks say, yes, we're going to continue guaranteed issue. But as we've heard today from the first panel and from others, there's fine print after it. It's guaranteed issue for people who maintain continuous coverage. And the people who don't maintain continuous coverage are sent into the seventh circle of hell of medical underwriting. I mean, we've gotten this out of our system. It's gone. Rating people based upon their prior illnesses, their chronic illnesses, their gender, whether they've ever been a victim of domestic violence, all that is gone. And if you look at the AHIP letter that was sent last week, they're not hungry, oh boy, let's get back into medical underwriting. They don't want to go there. And I don't know why we want to go there. So how do you maintain continuous coverage? How long is the gap? And when you're sent into the seventh circle of medical underwriting hell, how long do you live there for before you can get out again? And how many people are we estimating are going to fit in to this circle? We've got 28, 29 million uninsured now. They're all going to start out on day one in the circle of hell. There's some number, according to your subsidy scheme, of the 20 million who are going to lose coverage, who are going to fall into it. And then the next recession, people are going to fall out. What are we talking about here? No one is demanding. I don't see anyone in society demanding it. And I think there needs to be a little bit more being on the level with people that we're talking about preserving guaranteed issue for some, for privileged people, but the people who are going to fall into that circle of hell, they're going to be the lower middle income people. They're going to be the people who have chronic illness. They're going to be the people having a tougher time in the world. They're going to be the Trump voters. If you saw the Economist chart, right? Donald Trump won the vast majority of Americans with chronic illness, lower income. Hillary Clinton won the higher income, healthy people, right? But so I think there's got to be much more understanding, and I just find it disingenuous to say, oh, we're going to keep guaranteed issue and leave out that important clause, because that important clause is going to matter a lot to tens of millions of Americans. I haven't heard any estimate how many people, but let's get that out there. A third issue, mental health and substance abuse, otherwise known as behavioral health. The ACA happens to be one of the most important laws in the history of this country in advancing medical care and treatment and access for people who have mental illness and substance abuse. Guaranteed issue, essentially important in terms of not having a prior mental illness or current or substance abuse held against you when you're trying to buy insurance. Eliminating lifetime and annual benefit limits, incredibly important if you have serious mental illness. The essential health benefits. So behavioral health is one of the 10 essential health benefits, and prescription drugs is one of the 10 essential health benefits. These are just a few of the things that are critical. I don't hear any clear conversation from my colleagues or people who are in charge of this on how are you going to keep this together? How are you going to not make this worse? Because these are the people who are on the firing line in terms of losing coverage. And there's a bipartisan kumbaya. We want to deal with substance abuse and mental health and folks who are falling into this really deep systemic problem. But I don't see people facing up to the consequences for them of what's going on. Fourth concern, hospitals. So hospitals stepped forward in 2009 and made a deal with the White House and the Senate Finance Committee. We will give up $155 billion over 10 years. Now it's $350 billion over the current 10-year period to finance the coverage expansions in the ACA. And they did it. And they did it, and they stepped up to the plate because they wanted to get the monkey of America's uninsured off their back. And they made a commitment, and they stuck to it. Now we see in the reconciliation bill that you're going to repeal the taxes for the high-income folks through the Medicare payroll taxes, the unearned income and the earned income. You're going to repeal the taxes on the drug companies. You're going to repeal the taxes on the insurance companies, on the medical device. Heck, you're even gonna repeal the taxes on the indoor tanning salons, which is probably the most important public health measure in the whole damn law, if you know anything about melanoma among young women and how they're getting it and where they're getting it. Anyway, so you get all those things, but the hospitals who are going to be on the front line of the tens of millions of uninsured, you're saying, well, you're going to keep those cuts. So last week, American Hospital Association, Federation of American Hospitals sent a letter saying, hey folks, if you're gonna repeal all this stuff, we want our money back. Is that so illegitimate? But I think, this is part of the disingenuous that we see going on. Democrats were pilloried for cutting Medicare, cutting Granny's Medicare to pay for Obamacare, and then in budget after budget, when Paul Ryan was budget chair, he'd repeal the whole ACA except for the cuts to Medicare. He'd leave them in all the time. So there's this opportunistic thing going on. So I think if you're going to be fair to hospitals, you gotta address that. And we don't hear anybody on that saying that, but there's a problem with that. And the problem with that is that if you do give them that money back, you increase the costs of Medicare, and you're going to increase the premiums in Part B and Part D for all Medicare enrollees, and you're going to substantially shorten by, I forget how many years, the life of the Medicare Part A hospital trust fund. So you're on the horns of a dilemma, but where's the fairness here? Where's the fairness in saying everybody else who's been paying taxes, whether they agreed to it or not, gets a big break, but hospitals, tough luck to you guys, good luck caring for 20 million new uninsured coming through your doors for services, okay? Last thing I just want to mention, the last thing I'll say, this is about the exchanges, okay? An idea, by the way, from the Heritage Foundation. That's where it was Heritage Foundation folks who came up to Mitt Romney and said, you really got to create these health insurance exchanges. That's where the pedigree is. One of my colleagues at the Kennedy School, Ron Heifetz, he likes to say, there's two kinds of problems. There are technical problems, and there are adaptive problems or system problems, bigger things. And I think we need to have a more thorough discussion about the problems with the exchanges. Are these technical problems or are these systemic adaptive problems? And I think it'd be fair to say all three of my colleagues here and in the former panel would say, oh, these are big systemic problems. I would challenge that. I give the example of Alaska. Alaska this past summer saw their premiums in their individual market going up 42%. And the Alaska legislature, Republican-controlled, said, we can't let that happen. So they got together, they created a state reinsurance program for their individual market, exchange market and non-exchange. And overnight, the premium increases went from 42% down to 7%. California doesn't have a broken market. Other states don't have a broken market. We had a good exchange structure with premiums under control in 2014, 15, 16. It's going haywire in 17 because the risk corridors and the reinsurance are out. The risk adjustment has gotten messed up because of political fighting in Congress over it. But these are not systemic problems. These are fixable problems if there was a will. I spent 13 years as a member of the Massachusetts legislature, and I learned something in those years because we had joint committees, House and Senate. So I was a House chair and I had a Senate co-chair. And when the Senate co-chair and I, when we trusted each other and we could get along, the most difficult things could get done with ease. And when we didn't like each other, we couldn't schedule a darn hearing. We couldn't agree on lunch. It was just impossible. And so that is the problem, but it's not that there's a deep systemic failure of the exchanges. It's going through a very rocky period right now because, if we'd had a conference committee in time, we would have maybe made the 3 Rs permanent like they are in Medicare Part D. Why does reinsurance, risk adjustment, and risk corridors both a communist plot and a bailout to the insurance industry in the exchanges, and they're as American as apple pie in Medicare Part D? Can someone explain that to me, please? Okay, we'll wait for your turn. Because you'll get it. Anyway, so love to help you. And we got some stuff to talk about.